Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. Our topic this evening in this session is using time in a worthwhile way. This is part 1 of 2. So, as usual, we'll start with reflection. The seed of using time in a worthwhile way is to master the art of being fully present in this moment. Sometimes we try to race through time or pack a lot into time. But simply to be present in this moment, that means I fully value time. To be in this moment, in my most valuable state, that ensures that I will use time in a valuable way. And so I go inside and check the awareness I have towards myself. Is it ordinary? Is it careless? Is it completely absent? Or do I have a sacred sense of myself in this moment? The awareness that I am life itself. Nothing more valuable than life. It is not a waste of time to take a moment like this and ensure the awareness of myself is at its highest state. I, the living being, the soul, life itself, I am of great value. And holding that experience with great care, that enables me to be careful with this moment. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. So if you've just joined, the topic for the next 2 sessions is using time in a worthwhile way. And this is actually quite, it sounds a little bit redundant to say, but it's quite relevant to the last topic, which is about timing. It's very interesting because the topic of timing came up when the answer that, the question that has come up a couple of times, what can a soul do trying to help themselves move forward? And I know you'd often say timing, but it was very useful for the session about timing in terms of what exactly that means.
Mm.
And I was extremely touched from a morning class a couple of weeks ago about what that means, what is needed according to the time. And so it's very relevant to the session of using time in a worthwhile way. And just during the commentary, because we get this a lot from participants about, oh, this is the same as mindfulness.
Mm.
And they do talk about time in terms of, to be present.
Mm.
So because this is all about Raj Yoga,
Mm.
can you help to just clarify the difference? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, I mean, so much depends on everyone's got a different definition of words. So we can be using the same words and completely different messages because, so sort of breaking it down, I suppose, what would mindfulness be in Raj Yoga? We don't really use the word much. But it's quite an interesting word because it's really asking what is your mind full of? Um, and I suppose what's interesting about Raj Yoga is that there's just so much focus on the state of the self, and that it's the first step of everything else that we do. And so it's amazing how you can really be doing everything else and not that first step and get completely different results. So I could say, in perhaps other forms of mindfulness, be fully present and still not have any focus on the self. So performing the secondary action without the primary action. So that to me is always the big difference. In fact, if I do focus on the self, then I will be far more mindful. It's just natural. So we're trying to, and I was thinking a lot about the violence with which we go at things. And sometimes it doesn't even look violent. But without that first step, which is incredibly, I only say this because it was such a focus today. We talked a lot today about something called Dharma. What is the religion of the self? It's peace or nonviolence. And to be able to do that, I have to go into an experience of the self, or it will be violent. I could be trying to, act in what I perceive as very nonviolent things, such as to be loving, to be caring, and they still end up being violent. They're being done out of compulsion or out of addiction because I don't have that first step. So that to me is a big, big piece of Raj Yoga is what am I doing in the present moment? It's not just that I'm present, but I'm using it to really have a sense of the self.
It's great to bring that up because it really helps to bridge the second question is why is time such a big thing, whether or
Mm.
not you're aware of your soul, where you're not, this whole thing about being present.
So, Raj Yoga teaches us that we have many, many valuable treasures as human beings. And I'm not talking about the physical ones because those come and go, but treasures that we carry with ourselves always. And two biggies, which are very connected, are time and thoughts. And they're very important because they're really the containers in which karma happens. So we don't think of time as minutes, hours, seconds. We think of it as always as choices, 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 sort of like this canvas of my life, which stretches out into the future. And what I'm putting on, so this might be really our concept of mindful too, what I'm putting on the canvas of my life at this moment. Yes, it will lead to consequences, which we could call the future, but what am I doing? What choice am I making at this moment? So that's why I want to be very, if you will, in a very sacred state, because only then will I create, a really beautiful future. If I'm in an ordinary state or a careless state or a negligent state, then that will really dictate the choices I make and what my future will look like. So this is, time, thoughts, they work very closely together. Thoughts are the seed of action. Actions are what we paint on the canvas of time, this law of cause and effect. So really important resources.
It's very connected to our last topic about timing
Mm.
because of this aspect of desires. We
Mm.
have expectations, and what has come up in that last session, those last sessions were, am I doing things according to what's needed? And so, this aspect about am I even using time in a worthwhile way? What's the difference then? I know you've already alluded to it. If I'm not even aware of my sense of self and I'm trying to use time in a worthwhile way versus if I do start to have a sense of who I really am.
So there's the opposite word that we use in Raj Yoga to worth is waste. So either I'm using time in a worthwhile way or I'm using it in a wasteful way. And if we look at the world today, there is big issues with waste on every possible level. So we are creating massive amounts of waste because we are the producers of this waste. There's something wasteful in the choices we're making. And so unless I have some kind of shift inside in my capacities, I will continue. As they say, if you do the same thing, you'll create the same results. I'll just keep creating more and more waste. This lines up a bit with the law of entropy, but I'll just keep doing wasteful. It'll be less, although it might look on the surface with technology, but I'll never forget, when technology first started and there was the promise that there would be reduction of paper and it's multiplied threefold, the amount of paper, right? I mean, it's only because, and it's nothing wrong with technology. We as the users are wasteful. We can't use technology in a worthwhile way. So something has to shift inside of me. And I've always enjoyed this idea of I, the soul, am a point. And we think of the point as a full stop. So when I go into this sense of myself, what I'm actually doing is I'm stopping this runaway train of past addictive ways of operating. And I'm connecting with my spiritual capacity. So I'm putting a full stop to a run on sentence. And I'm going to be able to start a new sentence that will go in a different direction. That's only possible if I apply the full stop of a different awareness of myself. Otherwise, it's just the addictions, the old ways just keep operating, more and more waste, less and less worth. But this idea of I'm going to experience myself to be a soul, and it literally awakens different capacities to make different choices. So now I'm going to start a different sentence that doesn't continue this, kind of run on sentence of waste that we've been having.
A comment and a question. The comment is that it seems like we perceive a full stop as just stop thinking.
Mm.
I don't want to think that
It's
anymore.
actually start thinking. It's actually start thinking. Right.
The second thing is we were talking about awareness and you were talking about experiencing myself to be a soul.
Mm.
Can I actually be attempting, quote unquote, to experience myself to be a soul without even actually having that awareness? Is that possible to deceive
Yeah.
myself that way?
And I don't ever want to devalue any attempts to move into spirituality, but I have to be extremely honest with myself as I move into spirituality because I'm challenging the status quo. And the status quo will try to resist or stop me. And one of the number ways that the status quo, it's sort of this odd little conversation that happens inside, unbeknownst to me, it's happening out of that fear within is, oh dear, they're trying to move into spirituality. I will have to disguise myself so I can stay alive and deceive them into thinking that they're going somewhere, but they're actually not. So I might be sitting there thinking, I am a soul and, you know, wearing the right clothes and all sorts of things, but I'm actually not moving anywhere. So I'm always checking. And there's different signs and signals that we can use, but I'm always checking. There's different ways to check. Am I really, honestly, authentically having spiritual experiences or just sort of enamored with the idea of them, thinking about them, but I'm actually not going there.
So, speaking of using time in a worthwhile way, would then even being honest with myself actually help me move forward more?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever a waste of time. I know it might look like I'm moving at a snail's pace or I'm not going anyways, or sometimes it might look like I'm going backwards. Some of the most, when it comes to fitness, some of the most, I think, healthy and ultimately advanced athletes I've seen have a deep love for the basics. And they could be extremely advanced and have no problem going back to the basics, no problem whatsoever. Because they know the basics are the foundation, but they also want to make such clean, honest effort. They don't want their progress to have any kind of image because they know it will make them prone to injury. So I think that deep love for accuracy. And accuracy is so connected. I so enjoyed when it came up the other day in our coachable session for inner fitness. This idea of, because the soul who was sharing at that moment was actually talking about time and how they're always late. And they were sharing that they were in, again, you might use the word mindful, but they were in a very attentive state as they were going through their morning preparations. And it felt like they were going more slowly. It actually was going more carefully or accurately. So they landed up actually being on time. If we don't have that care and that attention to quality, we make mistakes and then it takes more time to fix the mistakes and keep moving. There's huge inefficiencies. So it's never a problem to go back and check the quality, accuracy, honesty, authenticity of what I'm doing. It doesn't put us behind, because the more I move forward with that quality, again, it will actually add up to incredibly fast speed of progress, taking that time to keep reinforcing the foundation, checking in. But if I don't, then I make mistakes and I actually will be wasting time down the road.
It's interesting because that word accurate, I know, I was sharing it and I looked it up earlier, but it means to heal, which is
Mm.
quite interesting about what's going to really honor myself. But I hope this isn't deviating, but because it is perhaps maybe using time in a worthwhile way, and we're talking about just wanting to experience myself to be a soul. What is your experience of what is happening if I hold that awareness, which feels like I'm holding a certain thought about myself, and just being open that something is realized, and so I can experience, because it can get quite deceiving. I'll just go straight and experience peace.
It's a very unusual situation. This idea that I want to experience myself. And then we add on that I am a soul. But basically, I want to experience myself. Now, that already, some would think that's very odd. What are you talking about? You're always experiencing yourself. So we can see that there's something very strange that's happened inside of us, that we are not experiencing ourselves, we're experiencing our image. And that's become quite unhealthy quite extreme. So then we have to do this strange thing where we sit down in a room with soft music and special lighting just so I can have an experience of myself. And I'm not ridiculing that act that we call seated meditation. It's absolutely essential because we're so far gone, so separated from ourselves, disconnected. The true meaning of religion is to reconnect with the self. So, and with God, of course, or the truth. But so we need to do that. But I really want to use that time, and souls struggle with that so much. We see the same thing happening in physical fitness, that souls will say, I don't have time for recovery, for stretching, for rest. I don't have time. I'm too busy, running around. So it's kind of a funny thing that they have time to do other things, but and we see the same thing. I don't have time to meditate. I'm too busy having to deal with issues in my life. And the irony is that if I meditated, I may not have those issues. So it's a very frightening trade off. It requires incredible trust that this is actually relevant to my life, to consider this is a good use of my time, to have that seated. And the reason we have to start with seated is because I, the soul, am very subtle. So to have an experience of myself, I really need 200% of my attention. And when we have disconnected with ourselves, our attention through our sense organs is so easily pulled outside that it's going to be impossible to get it off the ground. So I need to kind of, in a very gross way, which is what seated meditation really boils, I need to just create a context in which I can focus and have an experience of myself as, I'm this very subtle, I'm not physical. My sense organs, my physical sense organs can't even experience me. So that whole process of making time and feeling that it's relevant and worthwhile, even though many other things will pull, I have things to do, things to do, things to do. So that already is a challenge within the self. But then when I am seated, to give time, to not give up prematurely. It is, it's been a long time since I connected to my true self, and I'm very, very subtle. So I need to, it's not wasting time if, wow, I've sat, for a month and it hasn't been a waste of time. It's creating, preparing the soil. So I think making that time and then, not giving up, really appreciating that time.
When you were sharing about how subtle that we are and, taking the time to just to be able to experience that, the patience, I was thinking about something that I was also experimenting with, and I actually I don't remember which session that you had used this example, but I felt that it's very relevant that when you're asking someone to stand on one foot, and you had shared that they often tend to just grip with their toes to try to balance themselves, but that's actually not creating a sense of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was making me think about even the full stop,
Mm.
actually,
Mm.
that, or just trying to be not affected, that we want to feel that. And that is our nature. But because we've been feeling affected for so long, we just grip, we just lock down, we just push
Mm.
with our thoughts. And it reminds me so much of just gripping the floor with your feet.
Mm.
But then you were sharing about the just the physical equivalence of, you may have to sort of fill in the gaps right now in terms of what is really needing to biomechanically happen. It reminds me about that strength of the experience of being a soul, which is completely opposite. And that a part of the trust is that that just keeps reverting. You
Mm-hmm.
keep just reverting back, and you're not using time in a worthwhile way that way.
Yeah. It does require a lot of patience to switch operating systems, which is what we're doing when we say, and again, we realize more and more how violently we were operating when you're trying to force, even if it's something you know you should do, but I'm not doing it according to the right method. And so, just again, feeling that it's just so worthwhile to master the method, to not try and rush one's way through it, but to really take that time sincerely for the self, however, whatever my pace is, to master that method, so that it doesn't, and knowing that, yes, it will keep lapsing and it will keep doing all sorts of things, but and then, this giving up on the self can happen because the feeling, have I, after all this time, what do I have to show for it? But there has been things happening. I remember when I first came into the study and someone compared me to an eggplant or an avocado, I'm not sure which, but this fruit that for a very long time it appears nothing is happening. I think that's the most interesting. We're often told that things are very incognito and we just so much want something to happen yesterday. And I said, it was it was very helpful to be told this at the beginning of my study, almost as reassurance that I know for a long time it may not look like much is happening,
I
but
assume it was
keep
a compliment.
it. Yeah, it was really reassurance more than anything, but keep, it's very hard on our heart to lie to ourselves. And I always felt for myself, I've spent too much time deceiving myself. I did not come into the spiritual study to do that more. For what? To show other people or, to. So I came here to deconstruct ego. So if I'm, if it's not happening, that's fine, but I don't want it to be a false positive, if you will. So really so much of this is happening under the radar very quietly. But if I'm honest in my efforts, if I'm using time, worthwhile, honest, I don't know if there's much difference between the two. If I'm really using time in an honest way, even if it doesn't appear, and I know you love The Emperor's Seed, which is a classic example of this. As we say, if things are done with a pure intention, then there will always be fruit, no matter what it might look like at any given moment. Keep using time in that honest way. That's very worthwhile. And then you won't even actually care if the fruit comes or not. You'll be so happy with how you moved along.
Thank you. Of course, I love love that story, but I think it's also because something I was also thinking about. We learn in this study how the deepest change is at that level of sanskars, and perhaps maybe that's where we're wanting to see the change. Well, it could be that, or we're just trying to see, as you had shared earlier, that it's actually quite violent to try to um, be kind, but you're just sort of forcing yourself, and might not even feel apparent. That it can
Mm-hmm.
actually be your image, and you don't even realize that we become so numb that that's even violence as well.
Mm-hmm. I know that sometimes I would get the question if I was training at the gym for myself, and souls would come up to me and ask me, "What are you training for?" And I would say, "Nothing." They'd look at me a little bit confused. Said, "I just enjoy moving, and I just, that to me is a worthwhile use of my time." And I think that if one can get to the point here, we have that feeling that we're engaged in such a beautiful study that has the potential to make every moment beautiful. And we talk about, it's a study. Raj Yoga is understood to be a very ancient study that was taught by God Himself. So, this idea that I am studying with God, and the results are very nice, a divine character, that's very good, but it's so enjoyable, this act. We love every moment. We're not just sort of, I can't wait to get there. I mean, yes, but it's like, I really don't want this to end, because it's just, even when it's very challenging, and I know there's very challenging moments, very, very challenging moments for students, because you're really facing quite deep-rooted dynamics within the self, and fears and doubts, and it's quite it's been memorialized as a battle. So of course there's challenges, but it's such a worthwhile battle to engage in. When I think of all the options of things one can do with their life, this is so worthwhile, in the sense of elevating the self, making the self into a humane being. I can't think of anything more worthwhile to do with their life. And that's, I guess, the ultimate using time in a worthwhile way. I'd always sort of say, well, what else would I do with my life? What is more worthwhile than this? So I think when one understands all, they just enjoy the pilgrimage, as we call it, or the journey. And it's not just about reaching the destination.
No, we certainly acknowledge that everyone is in a different place in their life. And so I was wondering, in terms of someone who feels, so I'm using it in a worthwhile way, I have all this stuff that got done, I'm really productive.
Mm,
Is it more than a question about it's what one is looking for and needs at that time in their life?
mm. Yeah, this comes down to what is happiness. And, sometimes we compare it to having a parasite. I know this seems odd. Um, but, the parasite, there's things that make the parasite happy, and there are things that make you happy. So if you have a parasite, sometimes you go, I'm hungry. And as it turns out, you're not hungry, but the parasite is. And they've convinced you, because they want something to eat, that you're hungry because they want to be fed. So this is a lot of what happiness has become, that attachments want certain things, ego wants certain things, all these things that aren't really us. It's like parasites that have moved in, spiritually speaking, and they're just sort of convinced us, I want this, I want that, I'll be happy. And it's like, no, I won't, but they will be. So, what makes me, the soul, happy? It's a really interesting question, because today was a very interesting day. There's something unexpected that has come up, and there's only a few days to prepare. And I was with a soul, and they called, and it's like, I have to. They may say, I have to get this done in the next hour. So and so said, well, that's okay, but we're going to take just a second of silence. And they're like, no, we don't. Yeah, no, we're going to take a second of silence, because what was happening, I noticed for myself, is we start to just kind of dive into all the things that need to happen, incredibly inefficient, but also we were losing ourselves. This is how unhappiness happens. I could have tons of, I did this, check, 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 but no, I didn't do it peacefully. I didn't do it with dignity. I just did things. I wasn't present. And if there's not quality in what I'm doing, it means I'm not present. And that will make us feel incredibly off. So that's why we really have to understand what happiness is. And I need to be present. It's not just, I'm not a human doing, right? So it's not just doing, and check achievement. There's no achievement if it's not done in alignment with my core values, with me being present.
Would you say, from your personal experience, that disinterest plays a huge role?
It does. Disinterest is a sign that I'm at the beginning, that I'm ready to be free from enslavement to the vices. And as we go along, this disinterest is liberation. It turns into, I am free, right? So I'm doing things, and this is the essence of the Gita, the most ancient spiritual document. The essence is to perform actions whilst being beyond the effect of the actions. That I perform the action, but I have no interest in like, I don't need the result. I'm already full, content, complete. So I'm not looking for attainment through the action. I'm already full, which means the action now isn't from the outside in, what I can get out of it, but from the inside out, what I contribute through it. So it's a complete shift in the operating system.
So the reason why I ask about disinterest, a part of that, maybe we're kind of going back in circles for an individual who's like, well, I feel like I accomplished. I have less on my plate now.
That would
My
be
mind
nice.
feels lighter.
That would be nice. I've experimented with this a lot because I've realized that the plate will always be full, that it's always going to look ridiculous. So, what I enjoy doing is not that I don't care. Behind every task, there are people, and I care about the people. I want to respect my obligations to these people. So, it's not so much I care about the task, but I care about the people behind the task, the teams that I'm working with. So, I want to fulfill my responsibility out of respect for the team. But I remember one night I was lying awake in bed. There was a crazy amount of things to do. And I did the math and realized it was physically impossible to get everything done in the time allotted. And even if I used time, if I didn't sleep, it just wasn't going to be possible. So I'm sitting there saying, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you if you don't get things done? And I thought, well, first off, they don't get done. I suppose that's pretty bad. But people may not like me, or I might get fired because some of these were work things. And I said, those are the worst things that are going to happen to you. Like, you're not going to get hit by a car. It's not like a rock's going to fall. It's like people, So I realized it was all ego things. Again, ego.
I'm going to
So,
interrupt you for one
yeah,
second because this is connect to next week,
yeah.
but I do feel because you have a power of soul consciousness that allows you to be able to see that's ego. If someone is completely filled with you, that would just make them panic, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I guess I guess it's again that honest piece, that I remember, once someone was like, "Oh, I have so much to do." Oh, I said, "Well, let's meditate for just a moment." They said, "No, no, I'm too busy going." Whoa! So they weren't actually getting anything done either. They were just in a state of anxiety. So I think, it's really, if we don't take a look at what the drivers are behind things, the inefficiencies are massive. Not only that, but after I had this little conversation with myself, and I realized it was almost liberation to face the fears or the issues and say, but then it's fine. It's okay. That because the things I get to do are highly enjoyable. I'm very lucky that way. And it's like being a craftsman. You want to take care with each one. You don't want to just rush through and say check, but it's like I want to enjoy and take care. And I remember realizing, you know what, I'll just do what I can to the best of my ability, and everything will fall where it is. But the most important thing is that I'm honest and I remain intact. I remember the next day, one of these projects was massive, and I said yes to it because it was going to really help another center with respect to a partnership. And I remember the next day I got a phone call from the partner of the center, and it was very funny because I had been working on this project. It was this magazine, and usually you get months, and I think I had a week or something, and it wasn't going to happen because there was other things also do. And and I remember they called, and I didn't know this soul. We'd had one or two conversations, and they called after I had this very deep experience with myself of letting go. That night, they called and said, "So the organizers of the event have looked at what you've done." And he had been with me, sending notes saying, "No, it's good, keep going, it's great, everything's great." Says they've looked at it and they don't like what you've done. They want you to redo everything. And then he said, "But you know what? I personally can't ask that of you. Um, so I hope I don't offend you. We're going to take the project away from you and give it to another local designer who has the time." Now inside, I was like, "Oh, yes, this must have been a very difficult phone call." Inside, I'm doing a happy dance. I'm absolutely, but I found it more interesting in the sense of when we, and again, this is why soul consciousness is so important. it moves things. When we have deep, deep shifts in our being, drama moves because we've just sent a ripple into this ultimate meaning of time, which is karma. And so when we have a deep, deep shift inside, a deep realization, it sends a ripple out into this canvas of time. It's the deepest act we can perform is self-transformation. It's why it's such a powerful use of time is self-transformation. I have seen this over and over then. Souls who are students of Raj Yoga probably have experienced it, that a deep transformation of the self can achieve in a second what would normally take days, years, lifetimes. So it's such a good use of time. And yeah, it was very funny, the shift, he was so sweet. He's like, so I'd like to pay you, and I was like, "Oh, he didn't know I'm doing this pro bono for this." He was very, very sweet. Like he was like a different person with me in that moment. And it really was such an interesting learning for me because I've seen it again and again. It's never, ever a waste of time to take that kind of deep care with the self and one's own transformation rather than running around doing stuff. So
That's all about the Emperor and the Seed. If you
yeah.
haven't read that, I would highly
The
encourage you
Emperor's
to read that.
Seed. Yeah.
But next week, we will actually really delve a bit more into the how, the soul consciousness. Not about, ooh, I want to use the time in a worthwhile way to get all things done on my list, but
Or to get people to phone you and take them off your list.
but really about, again, even a part of it actually, what is my relationship with time? Is it
Mm,
healthy?
mm.
So thank you for joining. We're going to transition to a reflection now. And just one more thing, if you ever have questions, we do keep an eye on the chat box. You can always email the center, but you can always just send your questions, chat box or our email topics, anything, then we're happy to address. Thank you.
Time is such a great treasure. This moment, right now, this second, is invaluable. I can shift the trajectory of my entire life in a second. And we all know that in 1 second, our lives can change by a single incident. As a master of myself, as a master of time, how do I want to use this second, this moment? I choose to use it to reconnect with myself, letting everything else fade into the distance. I am just aware of my own presence, coming to a point in a second, the point that is me, the point of my own presence, I, the one who is thinking, the one who is observing, the one who is reflecting, the one who is experiencing. I am a point of awareness. And in this second, I am fully awake. So aware I am an eternal being, a soul, and I travel through time, performing actions through this body, the wonder of the self, this peaceful point of life that is me, constantly sending ripples of karma through the canvas of time. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for those for joining. We have gone over time. I will pass it back to you, Judy. What sessions are coming up?
This is always a pop quiz. So I think we're very close to posting April schedule on our website. We should have it ready by the end of April. What is time? So these Tuesday night interviews will continue. Public drop-in meditation will continue on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Sundays a full hour. And we do have a workshop coming up this month in English. There's many offerings in Hindi as well, and those are on the website. But the last Saturday of the month, April 24th, not the last Saturday, April 20, yes, April, okay, the last Saturday of the month, April 24th, there will be a 90-minute workshop, The Inner Compass, Our Inner Compass. Our Inner Compass. And so that will be a 90-minute workshop, 12 to 1:30. It'll be on the Zoom platform. So keep an eye out for that on our website. And feel free to join us next session where we'll have part 2 of this theme, using time in a worthwhile way. Thank you for spending your time with us, making that choice. Om Shanti.